Senator John Kennedy thought he had a winning strategy. Ask about Chicago, call her answer word salad, pivot to New Mexico, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, trap her into defending something extreme, then drop the hammer. Do you support outlawing fried foods? There was just one problem. Dr. Megan Ranney is the dean of the Yale School of Public Health, a board-certified emergency physician who has spent 20 years treating gunshot victims. She doesn't do gotcha. She does facts. And when Kennedy tried to twist her comparison between gun deaths and heart disease into support for banning fried foods, she asked a simple question. Have I said that I support outlawing anything in my testimony? She hasn't. He's fighting a ghost, and the ghost is winning. This is not a hearing. It's a humiliation. Let's watch.
So Mississippi, Louisiana, and Missouri actually have higher firearm death rates. Obviously, there's certain...
What about Chicago?
So I don't live in Chicago. It's not my primary area of research.
You don't have an opinion on that?
I think there's easy access to firearms combined with environmental conditions, lack of great education. There have actually been studies showing that when you green vacant lots and repair abandoned buildings in urban neighborhoods, you see decreases in gunshots, in violence, as well as in stress and depression in the neighborhoods around them.
No disrespect, Doc, but that sounds a lot like word salad to me.
I am a board-certified emergency physician and dean of the Yale School of Public Health. I've spent nearly 20 years working as an emergency physician in a top-tier trauma center. Here in the U.S., treating firearm injuries is a routine part of emergency medicine. During our training, we learn how to identify who must go right to an operating room, how to crack the chest of someone who's bleeding out, and how to notify family members of a death. While in training, though, we rarely, if ever, learn to ask what could be done to prevent a gunshot wound in the first place. That changed for me about 15 years ago, after I cared for a young man, the son of a first responder, who had shot himself with his parents' firearm. He was the first patient I'd cared for who had intentionally shot himself. I couldn't save him, but he changed my perspective on gun violence. First, his death drove me to learn more about firearm suicide, to realize that in the emergency department, we rarely saw suicide attempts from a gun, not because they were rare, but because they were so often fatal. Second, his death led me to question why we didn't think about gunshot wounds the same way we think about drunk driving or heart disease, as something we can and should prevent. Most disturbingly, I noticed the difference in how my colleagues responded to this suicide compared to the everyday toll of community gun violence. Since that case, I have treated people for every type of firearm injury, from domestic violence to victims of drive-bys. I've saved some lives, but not all, and have informed countless families of the loss of their loved ones. And it is because I have had a front row seat to our nation's growing firearm injury epidemic that I have worked to define and implement a public health approach to this crisis. To clarify, this is how a public health approach works. First, we gather data on the problem. How common is it and who is affected? Second, we define risk and protective factors. What increases or decreases the chance of someone being hurt or dying? Third, we figure out programs that work to change those patterns, to avert injury, hospitalization, or death. And finally, we scale what works. America's total number of gun deaths is the highest on record, and our rate nears its peak. Firearm deaths have surpassed breast cancer deaths in America. Firearms are now the leading cause of death for American children age 1 through 19. Although mass shootings get the most media attention, 2/3 of firearm deaths are preventable suicides, averaged over the last decade, like that young man I cared for 15 years ago. I have story after story of public health collaborations between gun owners and non-gun owners, hospital workers and community violence interrupters, faith leaders and survivors. We have shown we can reduce the risk of a shooting long before someone picks up a gun with intent to harm. Through your bipartisan commitment to this public health approach, our country can reduce firearm injury and death for all.
Let me ask you this. In September of this year, our New Mexico governor issued a public health emergency order, and she suspended the right to bear arms in Albuquerque and the surrounding county. Do you support that?
I do not. What I do support is the work that New Mexico has done
with... Do you support that?
No.
You don't? Okay. Let's see. During his first 2 years as the DA in Philadelphia, District Attorney Krasner and Loster dropped 47% of all the illegal firearms cases in the city. Do you agree with that?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm a physician and a public health professional. I can say that New Mexico has done amazing work in trying to address the suicide and partner violence.
I'm asking about Philadelphia.
I don't have an
The
opinion.
DA dropped 47% of all the illegal firearms cases. Did he do the right thing there?
I don't have an opinion. However, I will say that just as with fentanyl, the spread of illicit
I'm
substances.
sorry to cut you off, but I'm
That's
running
okay.
out of time.
Understood.
The LA District Attorney, George Gascon, said that he would not prosecute any sentencing enhancements for guns or gang-related activity. Do you think he did the right thing?
Again, I am neither a lawyer nor a prosecutor.
You don't have an opinion on that?
I honestly don't know enough about it to have an opinion.
You don't think gangs should be prosecuted for having illegal guns?
I'm neither a lawyer nor a prosecutor, and that's not my area of research.
But yet you want to take guns away.
I've never said that I want to take guns
from
away.
law-abiding citizens.
I think that you are saying something that I've not said in my written or oral testimony, sir.
Okay. You equated gun deaths to heart disease in your opening statement.
Yes, sir.
Which is a greater public health problem, gun deaths or heart disease?
So heart disease does kill more folks across the United States, largely in the end of their life.
About 700,000? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gun deaths about 50,000?
Correct.
Do you support outlawing fried foods?
I'm sorry. How does that relate to?
Because fried foods contribute to heart disease, don't they?
Again, I have not written or said that I support outlawing.
You're a physician, right?
I am. Have I said that I support outlawing anything in my testimony today?
There is a specific kind of political theater where an elected official confuses aggression with intelligence, interruption with debate, and gotcha questions with actual oversight. Senator John Kennedy walked into this hearing loaded for bear. He had his talking points. He had his statistics about Chicago, about Philadelphia, about Los Angeles. He had his snarky one-liner queued up. No disrespect, Doc, but that sounds a lot like word salad to me. And then Dr. Megan Ranney started talking, and Kennedy realized too late that he was not dealing with a politician. He was dealing with someone who has spent 2 decades pulling bullets out of human bodies and telling families their children are never coming home. When Kennedy calls her answer word salad, she doesn't get defensive. She doesn't match his tone. She simply states her credentials: board-certified emergency physician, dean of the Yale School of Public Health, 20 years in a top-tier trauma center. And then she tells a story. A young man, the son of a first responder, shot himself with his parents' gun. She couldn't save him. That story is the entire hearing in miniature. Kennedy wants to argue about politics, about prosecution rates, about whether gangs should be charged with sentencing enhancements. Ranney wants to talk about prevention, about why we don't ask what could have stopped that young man from pulling the trigger, about why we treat gunshot wounds as inevitable instead of preventable. She then lays out the public health approach in 4 simple steps: gather data, define risk factors, figure out what works, scale it. This is not controversial. This is how we solved drunk driving. This is how we reduced smoking rates. This is how we tackled lead poisoning and HIV and opioid overdoses. But Kennedy doesn't want to hear it. He pivots to New Mexico. A governor suspended the right to bear arms. Do you support that? Ranney says no. She doesn't support it. That should be the end of that line of questioning. But Kennedy doesn't care about her answer. He cares about the performance. He moves to Philadelphia. The DA dropped 47% of illegal firearms cases. Do you agree with that? Ranney says she's not a lawyer. She doesn't have an opinion. Kennedy presses. She still doesn't have an opinion. He moves to Los Angeles. The DA wouldn't prosecute sentencing enhancements for gang-related gun activity. Do you think he did the right thing? Again, Ranney says she's neither a lawyer nor a prosecutor. She doesn't know enough to have an opinion. Kennedy tries to twist this into something it's not. You don't think gangs should be prosecuted for having illegal guns? That's not what she said. She said she doesn't have an opinion on a specific prosecutor's specific policy decision in a city she doesn't live in, involving legal questions she's not trained to answer. And then Kennedy plays his final, desperate card. He goes back to heart disease. Which is a greater public health problem, gun deaths or heart disease? Ranney answers honestly. Heart disease kills more people, mostly at the end of life. Gun deaths are about 50,000 a year. Kennedy sees his opening. Do you support outlawing fried foods? It's a classic bad faith move. Take a comparison about prevention strategies and twist it into a question about prohibition. He's trying to make her look extreme, to force her to say something she's never said, to trap her into defending a position she doesn't hold. But Dr. Ranney doesn't take the bait. She doesn't get flustered. She doesn't laugh at him, though she would be justified in doing so. She just asks two simple questions. How does that relate to fried foods contributing to heart disease? And then, the killer. Have I said that I support outlawing anything in my testimony? She hasn't. She never has. Not once. Not in her written testimony. Not in her oral testimony. Not anywhere. Kennedy is arguing against a phantom. He is debating a position that exists only in his own head. And Dr. Ranney, with the calm precision of someone who has told hundreds of families that their loved one didn't survive, simply points that out. The humiliation here is not that Kennedy lost the argument. The humiliation is that he never even made one. He came prepared with gotcha questions about cities he doesn't represent and prosecutors he doesn't agree with. He came prepared to interrupt and insult and pivot. He did not come prepared to engage with the actual substance of what Dr. Ranney was saying. Because the substance is uncomfortable. The substance is that 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. That firearms are the leading cause of death for American children. That we have evidence-based solutions that work, from greening vacant lots to repairing abandoned buildings to safe storage laws to violence interrupter programs. The substance is that this is a public health crisis, not a culture war. And if you treat it like a culture war, you will never solve it. Kennedy's final question about fried foods reveals everything. He thinks he's being clever. He thinks he's exposing a logical inconsistency. But what he's really doing is admitting that he doesn't understand the difference between regulation and prohibition, between encouraging healthier choices and outlawing all choices, between a public health approach that uses education, incentives, and voluntary programs, and a dystopian fantasy where the government bans everything fun. Dr. Ranney has spent her entire career saving lives. She has cracked chests. She has held hands. She has delivered the worst news a person can receive. She does not need to be lectured about word salad by a senator whose entire strategy is to ask about cities he's never governed and prosecutors he's never voted for. The moment that will define this hearing is not Kennedy's questions. It's Dr. Ranney's quiet, patient, devastating response. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes. She just kept telling the truth. And the truth, in the end, is what made Kennedy look small. Because the truth is that 50,000 Americans die from guns every year. The truth is that children are killing themselves with their parents' firearms. The truth is that we know how to prevent at least some of these deaths, but we lack the political will to do it. And the truth is that calling a public health expert's answer word salad doesn't make you tough on crime. It makes you someone who would rather score points than save lives. Dr. Ranney won this exchange not because she shouted louder or interrupted more. She won because she showed up with decades of experience, a story that broke her heart, and a commitment to preventing the next family from hearing the news she's had to deliver too many times. Senator Kennedy showed up with talking points. Those are not the same thing.